Good morning, world changers. This is day 5 of More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us. And this is day 5, and today we're going to be looking at growing from our suffering. We've obviously looked at your story, Steve. I'm joined here by Rabbi Steve Leader, again, all the way from sunny Los Angeles. And we have been talking about, obviously, your story, what you've gone through, and the surviving the pain, healing the pain. And today we want to look at growing from the pain, how we can come out the other side, what you started off the week by saying, how we can come out the other side, not coming out empty-handed. So,
Right.
I mean, with your situation, you've already mentioned that you came out to the other side a kinder, better person. And it might seem a question that will give an obvious answer, but what has been the ripple effect on your family, your friends, your work? And, how has this been meant that your world has changed as a result of you being a kinder and better person?
Well, I'll start with the obvious, but end with something that might surprise you. I don't know, maybe not. On the obvious side, I evidence a lot more empathy for people when they come to me and they're suffering. Look, I don't think I was an unfeeling, unkind person before all of this began, but there is definitely an added measure of sensitivity and empathy when I relate to people now who are suffering and come to see me for help. This is also true with my own family, I think. The other thing I would say, there are two more. One, I think I'm an easier person to work for. And I think that our retention of clergy and staff has improved. Our attrition rate has dropped because I am doing everything I can to be a different kind of person and a different kind of, in business terms, manager and mentor. So I think I'm easier to work for. And finally, and most important of all, is that I am more proud of myself.
Okay.
And that's the part that I think is so very important, is that I am proud of myself now in ways I was not before. My temper is much less extreme, and as I said, I listen better and with more empathy. And at the end of the day, I feel better about myself. And for that to be one of the end results of a painful experience, to end up feeling better about who you are and who you've become as a result of it, that to me is a great victory.
Yeah. That's definitely more beautiful than before. Yeah.
Yes, that's the idea. And that was a big part of how I came up with the title. The original title, as we discussed before, was Weeds Bring Yellow Birds. But the working title closest to the one that finally was chosen, and the final title were based on this sentence in the book about living a life that is gentler, wiser, and more beautiful than before. So we just chose the last of those three, but there's a lot to be said for a gentler and wiser life too. And how I'm really proud of myself that I did not come out of this empty-handed, and I am trying to be worthy of what I went through.
Yeah. Because one of the things that you also say is when the pain stops, make sure that the promises to change don't. And, it can be so easy to slip back into the old habits,
Yes.
when we're back, you're not experiencing that pain. We haven't got that reminder anymore. So first of all, how do you stop yourself falling back into bad habits, falling back into breaking those promises, but advising other people, because it can be quite difficult if you see it happening, somebody going through that and falling into the old habits. Do you feel that you have an authority or permission to be able to say to somebody?
It depends on the nature of my relationship with that person. There are many people whose lives are none of my business, and I stay out of them. However, personally, I would say that as strange as this might sound, the essay in the book called Hurt and Run, which is about forgiving and being forgiven and the steps that I believe are required for a person to really merit forgiveness. The fourth of those four steps is to create some structure in your life that will prevent you from committing the same mistake again. Yeah. In religious terms, we would say the same sin again, but let's just call it a mistake. And so I have created structures and scaffolding in my life that prevent me from sliding back into my old self. First of all, my wife and kids, you know, are always watching out for me and how hard I'm working and my hours. And did you walk today? Did you do your core strengthening today? Why are you eating that? You know, do you really need to go into the office today? Do you really need to go to these meetings? Do you really need to fly to New York, you know, to be on television and have to turn around, you know, 12 hours later and come back and be exhausted? So that's one. My family is scaffolding. I have two assistants who help organize my work within the congregation, kind of secretaries, for lack of a better word, and a chief of staff. And I've instructed them to keep an eye on me and make sure that my schedule doesn't become a demon in my life. And I also sat them down and laid out expectations, you know, no appointments before 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, every Wednesday and Friday afternoon left open for writing and reading and thinking, because you know, there are four parts to my job, and one of them is teaching and preaching. Rabbi means teacher. That's what the word means. So I have, and of course, as we've discussed, I've remained in therapy. I sit down for 50 minutes every week with a really smart, you know, guy who really understands me as best as any outside person can, which is generally better than we can understand ourselves, by the way. And he too creates this scaffolding and structure around me. So I very deliberately have enlisted others to help me. This is part of reaching out for help. And I know that without it, I could very easily slip back into my old default setting. So I think we all have to, this is why people in recovery go to meetings. It's the same idea. It's an external structure and scaffolding that keeps us from backsliding, and very important. And generally the people you love are willing to do it. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there ever comes a point where you can go without that scaffolding, that structure, and, you know, you take full responsibility for your life, ownership of it, and just own everything, you know, the good, the bad, the shadow, or is this the human experience to have connection with people? I don't think the results would be as good. I think it's possible, and I think I might get a B. I don't think I'd get an A. And so an A now, though. I am actually, I have to say, I am doing really, really well through this pandemic. I'm working a lot, but I'm also shutting it down. And as I'd have to say also, eliminating the social obligations from my job requirements has been a great relief. You know, not having to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner with people has really been a relief and allowed me some control over my own life that I didn't have before. Yeah. Also, I'm not having to fundraise right now. It's a bad time to be out asking people for money. Yeah. And fundraising is an enormous, enormous job pressure that I've dealt with for, you know, the past 15 years. And so that's a relief. So there are some golden linings in all this, but to really be specific about your question, can a doctor really heal himself? I suppose to a degree, but not to the same degree as enlisting outside help. I think it's a sign of strength, not weakness, to ask people to join you in the endeavor of being a better human being. And is that possibly one of the, I mean, we talked about the purpose of pain the other day on Tuesday, but another reason for us personally experiencing pain is that
to grow from it is to prevent somebody else going through the same thing? Is it, or does everybody have to have their own experience?
They do. I don't think there's any other ticket of entry.
But it's our role not to learn something from that, grow from it, and then try to heal the world in some way, or heal a situation, or...
Look, I think what we can do is offer some light in the darkness to people who are groping for some light in the darkness. I don't think we can prevent them from entering darkness altogether. It's part of the human experience, as we discussed on the very first day. To be human is to suffer. Full stop. No parent can fully protect a child from suffering, nor should we. None of us can fully protect a friend, a loved one, a neighbor. None of us can fully protect others from suffering. And, you know, there's a great little book. It's been out a long time. It's written by a friend of mine named Wendy Mogul. And the book it's a parenting book, and it's called The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. And it's really about resilience, about what adversity teaches children about resilience, and why we shouldn't protect our children or overly protect them from resilience. Because if we do, they become hothouse flowers. And then when they have to thrive in the real world, they don't have what it takes. So even if we could protect people from their own foolishness, I'm not sure that we should. But I don't think we can. And I think it's part of the human experience. I do think we can set a good example about how to go through these difficulties. And that's what I've tried to do. That's what I've tried to do by writing the book. That's what I'm trying to do by speaking with you over these 5 days. I'm just trying to enable others to learn from what I hope is a good example of how one goes through this, armed with a tradition of wisdom and the strength and courage to reach out, and a beautiful network of family and friends who are willing to help.
So how do we ensure that we actually do grow from the experience, the suffering that we've experienced, rather than it continue to define us and, well, possibly control us, but define us? Because, I mean, I've seen a lot of people, and you've spoke about people that have transformed their lives, who started campaigning as a result of some tragedy that they've been through.
Yes.
And, you know, set up groups, support groups for other people going through the same thing. And that can end up defining a person. That person, oh, there's that mother that tragically lost her son, and now she set up the support group, and that's what she becomes. But, you know, how do we prevent, how do we grow, how do we heal, how do we survive it, and it not define us and be everything that we are?
I don't mind, well, everything is different than how it defines us. I don't mind being defined. In fact, I think I've lived my life in preparation to be defined. As the rabbi who thinks and writes about suffering and its lessons, I am fine being defined as that. Oh, he's the guy who writes the books about.
He's the go-to guy for that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, because in a way I feel like I've spent my entire life in preparation for that, including my own personal experiences that we've discussed, but also to share the distillate of the many thousands of conversations and vicarious experiences I've had with others through their suffering. So I don't really mind being defined by it, because you can be defined by something without it being the totality of who and what you are. Yeah. Right? I'm also the dad, I'm also the fly fisherman, you know, I'm also the hiker, I'm also the husband, I'm also the gardener, but it's not all that defines me. But I'm okay being defined in that way. And I think if we don't somehow allow our sufferings to define us, then we're not making the most of our sufferings. Remember that Dostoevsky quote that his greatest fear was that his life would not be worthy of his suffering. So I think leading a life worthy of what we've been through, that is definitional, but I think that's also a mission and a sacred mission, at least as far as I see it. You know, so I think if these things don't mark us and define us, then we're not fully experiencing them, right? If a suffering isn't experienced to its fullest, then what was it for?
Good point. And you have become a better teacher as a result, and you are leading by example now to help people. And if I suppose when we're talking about being defined, you're lots of different things. Depends on the relationship you have with the person. So somebody may come to you because you are the go-to person that talks about pain, but your sons, daughters will come to you for other reasons. Your wife will come.
Yes. And people are coming from all over the world now. We have a conversation going now about how to transcend and transform suffering. And you know, this is a little bit or a lot egotistical, but just to share one little brief sort of very moving and proud moment of my life internally was like all authors, when they have a new book come out, I was on Amazon 100 times a day seeing how it was doing and where it was ranked, and you know, all of that, because there's some ego involved in writing.
Of course,
you know,
yeah. You're very proud of your baby.
Yeah, well, and to believe that you have something to say other people should read, there's some ego involved in that.
Of course.
Sure.
I think that's allowed.
Yeah, ego and art are, you know, symbiotic. One of the most remarkable moments of my life, and it happened in this very room in front of this very computer completely alone, was when I looked at my book ranking, and you know, Amazon has categories, and in the category of Jewish books, it was #1, ahead of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, okay.
Harold Schulweiss's When Bad Things Happen to Good People, and Abraham Joshua Heschel's The Sabbath, which are, I mean, that is rarefied air.
Yeah.
And it stayed there for, you know, a couple of years. So, and it went to, you know, #4 overall on Amazon. It went to #1 in books on death and loss, and love and loss, and death and grief. You know, to be defined in that way, to me, it felt beautiful and right. And that what I had been through and what I've learned from so many others, and from showing up so many times for other people who are suffering, it wasn't all for naught. You know, it's not easy to get the call at 2 a.m. and show up, you know, at the hospital, and show up and walk in someone's front door, and, you know, my husband just tried to commit suicide and he's in the ER in a coma because of the drugs he swallowed. Please come. These things are not easy to show up for, for 25, 30, 35 years. And they have defined me, and therefore to be defined by them, to me, seems right. I think this is a larger point. By the way, no one has really asked me about this before, and I think it's a really powerful question you've asked. I think not to be defined by these foundational experiences would be somehow disrespectful of their magnitude and meaning. You know, let's look at this pandemic for a moment that we're all living through. If we don't allow this in some ways to define us, then we are in complete denial and have a complete and total lack of humility before powers greater than we. We've completely missed the point. So I'm okay being defined by it, but not only by it.
Okay. And I mean, just touching on that note about the amount of people that you do support and the types of people, or the calls that you receive, how do you stop yourself being, I mean, not affected, because you have to be affected, but really able to let it go, to not let it infect, I suppose is the word.
I have done better and worse at that throughout my career. There are times when I've been very good at shutting it down, letting it go, not being affected by it. But there are times where it is a very heavy burden. It's exhausting. It causes me to be short-tempered at home. It causes me to view my wife's problems without the proper degree of empathy. You know, it's very easy to walk in the door and play the, when she has an issue, to play the, well, that's nothing compared to what I dealt with today, right? I buried a child today. I dealt with a suicide today. I dealt with an overdose today. You know, I dealt with a malignancy in a young father today. It's very easy to play that card. And sometimes I slip into that, and I do. I think any physician will tell you this. I think any therapist will tell you this. It is hard not to bring it home, and it is damaging sometimes. I think I've gotten better at it as I've matured. But I do, with, again, being in therapy, watch out for the warning signs, you know, and I have to shut it down if, you know, am I drinking every night, for example? Am I having 2 scotches every night instead of 1 scotch every night? Am I having 1 scotch every night instead of twice a week? You know, am I eating in an unhealthy way all of a sudden? Am I eating chips and cookies and all of that, you know? Am I falling asleep on the couch at 7 o'clock at night and not being present with my family? You know, there are warning signs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I know enough to recognize them and shut them down. And I will also say that the books that I have written, and the one I am writing literally today, when we're done with this, are also a way of processing and managing these very emotionally intense experiences that I go through as you know, the senior clergy of a 10,000 person you know, synagogue or church. So, you know, that, and I do talk to colleagues. That helps. There's a kind of black humor among clergy that helps.
You need that, though. You need
Yeah,
that.
I think it's just, it's a
any line of
natural.
work.
Yeah, physicians have it, teachers have it, therapists have it. I think it's a natural outgrowth of the intensity of the work. But honestly, sometimes I fail. I do fail, and I do get frayed, and I do get exhausted. And as I get older, you know, I am more efficient emotionally and intellectually. You know, a eulogy that might have taken me 3 hours to write 20 years ago takes me an hour to write now. So experience helps to a large degree. And I'm also mature enough now to recognize warning signs that I didn't really recognize before in the past. So there is some value to maturity and experience. However, the flip side of that is that I also get tired more easily. And you know, that's something that has to be talked about.
Sorry, the sound has just gone on my computer for some reason, so I'm going to have to stick headphones on.
Okay. I also, for some reason, I have workers now outside who decided to show up now in the middle of this, and they're making some noise. Can you hear it?
No, I can't. But I've
Okay,
we're just coming to the end. We're going to wrap
okay.
up here. But I want to know, I mean, one of the things that you said, you know, pain is an invitation to fix what is broken, you know,
Yes.
to examine your life, to look at what we need to change about this situation. Just given what we're going through globally with the COVID-19, what did you think we can learn and take away from this experience to grow in order to heal the world, or heal ourselves, or heal our current situation, our environment, our family, our work situation, whatever it might be?
There are so
Big
many
question,
lessons.
sorry.
There are so many lessons, and I'll run through a number of them quickly. First of all, I hope that we all become less materialistic as a result of this, that we all really take to heart that it's who we have, not what we have, that matters. And believe me, the moment it's possible, corporations are going to start convincing us that the answer to our problems is to buy more crap.
Yes.
There's no question about it. And the pent-up demand will feed into all of that. So first, I hope that we really, really remember that it is not what we have, but who we have that matters.
Yeah.
And how few things we really need to be happy. The second thing I would say is, I hope it continues to remind us to be humble. that we're vulnerable, that our neighbors are vulnerable, that our friends are vulnerable, that we are vulnerable, and that we really need to watch out for and take care of each other. That we really are literally in each other's hands. I was just on the phone with my physician earlier this morning because I need to get a shingles shot, and there's a time limit on when you have to have the second dose. And I asked him how things are going. He said, well, my patients are generally so much healthier because they're washing their hands, they're wearing masks, they're limiting contact. This has been fantastic for overall health, not just for preventing the spread of the virus. And he said, I hope people continue to respect their bodies and each other as much as they are now when this whole thing is over. So that's yet another thing. And there has been, this has revealed, I don't know about Scotland, but I do know about the United States, and I do know about Los Angeles because I spend 5 or 10 minutes every morning on the phone with our mayor. We pray together every morning before he starts his day. And I can tell you that this pandemic has uncovered what we all knew was there all along, which is the tremendous economic disparity in our society.
Absolutely.
The stratification is alarming. And the number of people who are so vulnerable if they miss a single paycheck, one, and it's the tipping point. And the risk to the homeless and the precariousness of their lives and our obligation to do something about it have been very starkly revealed through this pandemic. And I hope that sticks. And as we discussed earlier, I hope that others, as I have fallen more deeply in love with the wisdom of their traditions, the wisdom of the ancients, and the wisdom of hunkering down at home, which is where most of us really belong most of the time, right? Enough buying and shopping, buying and shopping, buying and shopping, driving, buying, shopping, driving, buying, shopping, clicking, buying, shopping, clicking, buying, shopping. Enough, shut it down. That's being alive, but it's not really living, So let's, to coin a phrase, let this make us all and our lives more beautiful than before. And then we will really have something to celebrate and be grateful for. That's my hope. That's my prayer.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful hope and prayer as well. And I mean, it's one of my passions as well. I don't think people realize just how powerful they are as individuals. And for every penny you spend, you're voting for the future that you want, because you're creating the demand with the where you spend your money. And it's, if we can work on focusing on what we need rather than just our wants,
right.
then that will change our dynamics.
I'm sorry about that noise.
That's okay, don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah. And I would also add that time is finite. And this has been a great reminder of finitude, both our own physical finitude and the finite nature of time. Time is every bit as precious. It's one of those things you just cannot get back when it's gone. And hopefully this will help us all make better use of our time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to leave it there, Steve. You've been an absolute delight to talk to. You've pushed my comfort zone, making me do this when I don't like. No, I want to hide behind the scenes. Let the coaches do it. So
you've done a beautiful job. And by the way, the fact that you come to it with fresh eyes, ears, and sensibilities, I will tell you, having been interviewed, I don't know how many hundreds of times about these subjects, you have come to me with new questions I have never been asked before, even by some of the best journalists in the world. So I think you have a very bright future ahead of you, Suzy. Well done.
Thank you, bless you. Well, thank you for making me grow, allowing me to grow, and supporting me to grow. And everybody, this is Steve's book, More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us. We'll obviously put all the links into the comments, and Steve will be in the group if you do want to connect with them and ask any questions later on after the broadcast. So thank you again, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure. And stay well, Suzy. Stay safe.
I hope our paths can cross when this is all behind us.
Oh, I hope so. I'm definitely coming to Los Angeles to come and swim in your swimming pool.
You're invited. You're invited.
All right,
Bye-bye.
all the
Great to
best.
be with you.
Take care. Bye bye.